Trouble concentrating. Given how one's mind is abuzz with a lot of unnecessary voices that they can't shut off, it's no surprise that people suffering from anxiety have trouble concentrating. Their focus is all over the place, which puts them at a disadvantage because it renders them incapable of finishing even the simplest of tasks. Tense or irritable. Since the body and mind are overwhelmed, the person suffering from anxiety feels distressed, which results in them finding it hard to tolerate stuff that they usually could, making them feel irritable and even more tense. Nausea and abdominal stress. Your brain and gut are connected in more ways than one, which is why when we're feeling anxious, we either get nauseous, suffer from abdominal stress, or even both. This is your body's fight or flight response, with your brain sending a signal that affects your digestive system. Because of this, it's no surprise that anxious people feel lightheaded, suffer from gastrointestinal problems, or even both at the same time. Having heart palpitations. As we mentioned earlier, anxiety triggers the body's fight or flight response, leaving one's heart racing or pounding. But this isn't even the worst part of it, because according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, continued heart palpitations are a major symptom of panic disorder. Rapid and heavy breathing. Because your body is reacting to a fearful situation, anxiety increases the body's heart rate, thus pumping more blood to the organs much faster. Because of that, the muscles are now ready to spring into action. The thing about oxygen being pumped into the muscles is that we have to start moving. Take a walk, run, jog, or whatever, but we must move. Otherwise, the body will suffer a temporary imbalance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our blood, which leads to shortness of breath and heavy breathing. Sweating and trembling. Anxiety also causes your body to produce adrenaline and a hormone related to stress called cortisol. These hormones send a message to the eccrine and apocrine glands, the latter of which is located in the armpit and groin. Whenever we sweat, it's the body's mechanism to cool down, which is a useful adaptation if we feel that we're under threat. As for shaking, this is your body preparing to deal with the stressor, wherein they identify the anxiety as a signal that you need to stand your ground or run away. Since your muscles are roaring to go, it leads to a trembling and shaking feeling. Online personality. Having a more vibrant online personality compared to one's in-person interactions can signal social anxiety. Online, the fear of judgment diminishes, allowing individuals with social anxiety to express themselves more freely, contrary to real-world settings where direct interaction may trigger anxiety symptoms, like fear of embarrassment or negative evaluation. This digital confidence versus real-life reservation highlights how social anxiety can restrict genuine expression in face-to-face scenarios. Trouble sleeping or suffering from insomnia. As we all know, anxiety triggers a lot of responses in our physical, mental, and emotional aspects. We mentioned earlier how being anxious could make you feel that everything's too much, which also applies to all of our senses. Now that you're flooded with these emotions and thoughts, you find it hard to have a good night's sleep, all because of anxiety. Having a sense of impending danger. Having a constant feeling of being in danger could lead you to panic and fear, making you feel on edge even if there's nothing to worry about. As we mentioned earlier, everybody has their share of experience being anxious, but for people with anxiety disorders, this constant feeling of being in danger interrupts their way of life, to the point that they cannot function normally since they believe things are about to get worse. Generalized anxiety disorder. One of the most common types of anxiety is generalized anxiety disorder, wherein you constantly worry about your daily activities or even past events. Agoraphobia. Another type of anxiety that a lot of people suffer from is called agoraphobia, wherein they have fear, worry, and avoid situations excessively that they think might leave them feeling trapped or embarrassed. Selective mutism. Selective mutism is a condition wherein they are unable to speak in certain situations or contexts, even if they're perfectly capable of conversing normally with the people they're familiar with. This type of disorder is pretty common among children, though adults can also suffer from it. Panic disorder. A person suffering from anxiety could also develop a panic disorder, wherein they are prone to experiencing panic attacks. Even if they may not experience one, they're in constant fear of suffering from a panic attack at any given time or situation. Social anxiety disorder. There's also social anxiety disorder, wherein one has an indescribable fear of being rejected, ridiculed, or even rejected by people in a social setting. Gen Zs, as well as a high number of millennials, have been experiencing a high level of stress, according to reports. Separation anxiety disorder. As we've mentioned before, anxiety also has an emotional effect on individuals, which is why some people have separation anxiety disorder, wherein they experience excessive worry about being separated from the person or object of affection that they're emotionally attached to. Phobias and irrational fear. Having anxiety could also lead to an individual developing phobias or unrealistic fears of a certain object, activity, or situation to the point that they may go to extreme lengths just to avoid their triggers. Post-traumatic stress disorder. If we're talking about extreme anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder belongs to this category since it's triggered in the aftermath of a traumatic or life-threatening situation. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. Anxiety could also lead to obsessive-compulsive disorder, wherein the individual suffering may experience unwanted thoughts and behaviors that are nearly impossible to control. Out of all of the listed anxiety disorders, social anxiety disorder is the most common, along with generalized anxiety disorder. Social media has also played a part in the development of many people's anxieties in recent years, especially among millennials and Gen Zs. Although there are a certain number of us who casually use social media, there's a large portion of the population that's been gravely affected by it. In America alone, the Pew Research Center published a report that 69% of American adults and 81% of teens use social media. With such a high number of users, their exposure to content that makes them feel anxious, depressed, or insecure is incredibly high. Doomscrolling. Otherwise called doom surfing, doomscrolling refers to the act when a person actively seeks out social media content that has a harmful effect on them. The idea behind this is that they want to avoid bad things happening to them, so they try to consume as much information as they can, even though it's detrimental to them. What's even worse about this is that it's so addictive because the brain is hung up on wanting to consume more negative media when it has repeated exposure to it, with a lot of people not realizing that they've fallen for it. The constant need to update. Whether you admit it or not, social media has an influential and reinforcing nature, and using it emits a signal to the brain to release the feel-good hormone dopamine, which is connected to feel-good activities such as food, social interaction, and sex. Many of us have joined this rat race wherein a lot of us chase this feel-good hormone, feeling rewarded whenever we receive more likes, followers, and comments. The downside is that we also feel compelled to check our social media every hour, hoping we could experience this positive reinforcement, only to be let down when we see there's no new development. This will, in turn, make us anxious and feel on edge, thinking that you're not enough and you should do more. Fear of missing out. FOMO is another onset effect of how social media worsens a person's anxiety. If a person refuses to consume media, there's always that lingering feeling that they might miss an inside joke, event, or any other minute detail that would have had them feeling left out. Missing such experiences could make their anxiety and depression even worse, since it makes them feel as if they're excluded from the event, which could affect them physically. In 2018, one British study published a report wherein they found a connection between social media and how a person's sleep suffered greatly because of depression. Not only did their depression worsen, but they also performed poorly, suffered poor memory, and had trouble concentrating. Harmful interactions. The younger a person is exposed to social media, the more it has an effect on their mental health, which is why a large percentage of Gen Z suffer from depression and anxiety. However, its effect on both genders differs since boys tend to act more aggressively, while girls are inclined to share hurtful comments and exclude others. This is why bullying is not only more prevalent now, but also has worsened because of social media. According to a report published by Annapolis, almost 42% of children admit that they have been cyberbullied and that it has happened to almost 1 in 4 kids. An urge to pretend. There are many factors at play. But out of all the generations, Gen Z and millennials are by far the most affected by anxiety disorders, and social media has played a big part in it, especially in how it gives a distorted perception of appearances and reality. There's always that lingering thought that they may not live up to people's expectations or ideals as seen on their feed. The pressure continues to build up, so there are more instances when their generation couldn't help but cave into the pressure, using filters and showing their followers how they're always showing how much of a good time they're having, even if in reality, they're not. But let's just say that you're someone who already has a diagnosed anxiety disorder, It may even be more of a struggle for you to see how many of your peers and colleagues showcase how they're living a far better life than you, which increases your urge to portray a different and better image of yourself on social media. Digital fatigue. There's more than enough proof that research shows that compulsive use of social media may trigger social media fatigue among the younger generation. Various reports have claimed that Gen Z's mental health struggle is far different from that of any other generations, closely followed by the millennials. In 2023, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention even named poor mental health as a substantial public health problem for teenagers, of which a large percentage consisted of teen girls.